a hospital because they have their own tunnels, they have other areas. So this unjustified that targeting the Al-Quds hospital, Al-Shifa hospital, and other hospitals. This is unacceptable according to the international law, the war law, the humanitarian law. It could be criticized by all the international organizations. And the sympathy that was with Israel, pro-Israel at the beginning of this war, now changed because no one accepts to target the hospital.
Mr. Najib, this was the question that I wanted to ask you. In the initial days of the war, Israel had said that it does not target hospitals. And now it is saying that Hamas has got its main command center underneath the Al-Shifa hospital. Now, there are a lot of international health agencies which operate in the Al-Shifa hospital. Has there ever been any evidence that Hamas has a command center underneath the Al-Shifa hospital?
I saw some evidences and testimonies for those engineers who built the hospitals there, and Indonesian hospital, Al-Quds hospital, and also the foreign medicines who operate and work at Al-Shifa hospital. And they said they toured the hospital. They didn't find any command center for Hamas in that area. But as long as the Israeli tanks are 200 meters away from Al-Shifa hospital and 20 meters from Al-Quds hospital that belong to the Red Crescent, so let them go inside and see and arrest them, show us the footage, arrest Hamas guys, and prove to the world that. But, Hamas didn't find any place in Gaza just to go to hide in the hospital because the fear is growing. Hamas wants the ground incursion to clash face-to-face personally with the Israeli armed forces, not to hide from them. So this is not the fighting doctrine of Hamas to hide in the hospital at the moment. They want to fight, and the people there inside, maybe 1, 2, 3 injured there, treated, 100 injured treated from Hamas in the hospital. That could be believable, but not like to use it as a stronghold.
Mr. Najib, we also need to talk about what is happening in the West Bank. The world's attention at this moment is focused on what is happening in the Gaza Strip. But the fact is, even in the West Bank, there's been a sharp uptick in the violence that has taken place. An estimated 160-odd Palestinians have been killed in the last 1 month. Tell us what the situation is like at this moment due to the violence that is unfolding in the West Bank where you are.
Yes, Muhammad. Even the war started by Hamas and Israel in Gaza, but the West Bank wasn't part of that. But since the first day, the Israeli armed forces closed the West Bank and prevented 200,000 Palestinian workers to go to work in Israel and the other 3 million to go to Israel. They reactivate and set up 750 military checkpoints across the West Bank, restricted the freedom of movement. They also heavily cracked down on towns, refugees camps, cities. Every day, every night, there are raids for the IDF. They are using live ammunition, excessive force against Palestinians, demonstrators, even stone throwers, not necessarily gunmen. And that's resulted in 186 killed, 2,300 injured, and around 2,400 arrested by Israel. So the clashes continues. The Israeli incursion continues against the West Bank and home demolition. And the Palestinians here are very angry and very upset because Israel military cracked down on them. The settler prevent them from picking up their olive from the farms near the settlements and attacking them. Israel deducted the Palestinian Authority tax money, so the Palestinian Authority is unable to pay the salaries for its public employees, 150,000 for October, and they prevent the workers to work in Israel. And they are angry because they feel they are helpless. They cannot help their people in Gaza. Muhammad, in the previous Israeli wars against Gaza, the crossing borders between Gaza and Israel were open. So Palestinians from here in Ramallah and West Bank donate water, medical supplies, food supplies, and send to their people. Now it's closed. They can't do anything except protestations and demonstration. But who do like on the Facebook get arrested? It's not an easy situation. It's an unprecedented escalation by the Israelis that push the West Bank for more escalation and violence.
We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Najib, for joining us and getting us an update on what the situation at this moment is like in both the Gaza Strip and also in the West Bank.
Thank you.
The death toll is rising as the fighting intensifies between Israeli forces and Hamas militant near and around hospitals. Israel is now facing mounting international pressure, including from its main ally, the United States, to do more to protect Palestinian civilians in Gaza. In what appeared to be a series of Israeli military airstrikes in the Palestinian territory, a series of explosions lit up the night sky over the Gaza Strip. And the Hamas-run Gaza Health Services say more than 11,000 Palestinians have been killed since the fighting began. Now, according to Hamas Health Ministry, at least 3 strikes over several hours hit the courtyard and the obstetrics department of Al-Shifa hospital, killing several and wounding others sheltering there. Chaotic scenes were seen outside the hospital as many were attempting to flee. Israel's military said that a misfired projectile launched by militant groups in Gaza had hit Al-Shifa hospital. It further dismissed reports that said that the blast was caused by an Israeli airstrike. In another attack by Israeli forces, 1 person was killed and 28 others were wounded in a shooting by Israeli forces at Al-Quds hospital in Gaza. Medical teams in Gaza City's Al-Quds hospital worked under torchlight to treat the patients. And on the other hand, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited an army base at the border with Gaza. Netanyahu spoke with soldiers and joined them for Sabbath service. He praised the soldiers for their job to security of Israel. Meanwhile, evacuations from the Gaza Strip into Egypt for foreign passport holders and for Palestinians needing urgent medical treatment were suspended due to problems bringing medical evacuees to the Rafah border crossing from inside Gaza. And this comes as Israel's chief military spokesperson, Rear Admiral, said that more than 100,000 residents of the Gaza Strip have fled southwards over the last 2 days as Israeli forces operate deep in the Gaza city. The Israeli military released video, it says, showed airstrikes on a series of Hezbollah targets in Lebanese territory, and the attacks also included military positions where the group was believed to have been operating, a weapons warehouse and an intelligence site. In an interview with BBC French President Emmanuel Macron said that while he recognizes Israel's right to protect itself, there was no justification for the bombing, saying a ceasefire would benefit Israel. On the other hand, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said that the Palestinian Authority could play a role in administering the Gaza Strip on condition that there was a full political solution that also encompassed the occupied West Bank. Amnesty International Secretary has called out the Western Bloc's double standards when it comes to international conflicts that are a threat to human rights. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman called for an end to the war in Gaza during an African-Saudi summit held in the kingdom's capital, Riyadh.
وندين ما يشهده قطاع غزة من اعتداء عسكري واستهداف المدنيين واستمرار انتهاكات سلطة الاحتلال الإسرائيلية للقانون الدولي الإنساني لنؤكد ضرورة وقف هذه الحرب والتهجير القسري وتأهية الظروف لعودة الاستقرار وتحقيق السلام في أفريقيا، وذلك عبر تدشين مشروعات وبرامج مائية في دول القارة بقيمة تتجاوز $1 مليار على مدى 10 سنوات.
The United States expressed growing concern about the rising Palestinian death toll in the Gaza Strip, where health officials said that the number killed in a 5-week-old Israeli bombardment had topped 11,000. Israel has meanwhile revised Hamas attack death toll to around 1,200.
So the relentless bombing campaign by the Israelis still continues. Israel says that its mission is to eradicate Hamas from the face of the earth, but what it is also doing is it is wreaking enormous amount of suffering on the people of Gaza with its airstrikes and air bombings. The Israeli military has increased its activities in the Gaza Strip, and they've left literally no house or hospital or school untouched. Take a look.
We begin with Israel-Hamas war and the latest that's come in, and as the fighting continues to rage between Israeli forces and Hamas militants near and around Gaza's largest hospital, Al-Shifa, as the humanitarian situation worsens, Israel military said that it was ready to evacuate babies from the hospital. Now, it's the same hospital where Palestinian officials said that 2 newborns died and dozens more were at risk after fuel ran out amid intense fighting in that area. Israeli military has said that hospital staff had requested assistance to transfer babies to a safer hospital.
The east side of the hospital is open on El-Wadi Street for the safe pass of Gazans who wish to leave the hospital. We're speaking directly and regularly with the hospital staff. The staff of the Shifa hospital has requested that tomorrow we will help the babies in the pediatric department to get to a safer hospital. We will provide the assistance needed.
The Israeli military released videos showing the continued ground operation inside Gaza Strip, where its military tanks were firing at targets believed to be Hamas infrastructure. And during the operation, the military said that a number of weapons were found in a kindergarten. They also said that they've also destroyed dozens of tunnel openings. And this comes as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that his aim for Israel would take control of security in Gaza for an indefinite period. He added that Israel wanted to be able to re-enter the Strip whenever necessary. And amid the continued fighting, Hamas said it had completely or partially destroyed more than 160 Israeli military targets at Gaza, including more than 25 vehicles in the past 48 hours. However, an Israeli military spokesperson said that Hamas lost control of northern Gaza. Meanwhile, Hezbollah's chief Hassan Nasrallah said that the group was using the new weapons in its attacks against Israel. On the other hand, several people were reportedly killed and others were injured in an Israeli airstrike that targeted the city of Rafah in Gaza. And this comes as Gaza's border authority said that the Rafah crossing into Egypt would reopen on Sunday for foreign passport holders after closing on Friday. Egyptian sources said that the border would begin operating at 9 a.m. local time for foreigners and medical evacuees. India was among the 145 nations that voted in favor of the United Nations resolution that condemned settlement activities in the occupied Palestinian territory. The UN draft resolution titled Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem and the occupied Syrian Golan, was passed by overwhelming majority. According to Israeli media, there was some progress towards a deal to free hostages held by Hamas in Gaza. And this is according to reports that Israel would release women and minor Palestinian prisoners from its jails and consider letting fuel into Gaza. We begin with Israel-Hamas war and the latest that's come in, and as the fighting continues to rage between Israeli forces and Hamas militants near and around Gaza's largest hospital, Al-Shifa, as the humanitarian situation worsens, Israel military said that it was ready to evacuate babies from the hospital. Now, it's the same hospital where Palestinian officials said that 2 newborns died and dozens more were at risk after fuel ran out amid intense fighting in that area. Israeli military has said that hospital staff had requested assistance to transfer babies to a safer hospital.
The east side of the hospital is open on El-Wadi Street for the safe pass of Gazans who wish to leave the hospital. We're speaking directly and regularly with the hospital staff. The staff of the Shifa hospital has requested that tomorrow we will help the babies in the pediatric department to get to a safer hospital. We will provide the assistance needed.
The Israeli military released videos showing the continued ground operation inside Gaza Strip, where its military tanks were firing at targets believed to be Hamas infrastructure. And during the operation, the military said that a number of weapons were found in a kindergarten. They also said that they've also destroyed dozens of tunnel openings. And this comes as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that his aim for Israel would take control of security in Gaza for an indefinite period. He added that Israel wanted to be able to re-enter the Strip whenever necessary. And amid the continued fighting, Hamas said it had completely or partially destroyed more than 160 Israeli military targets at Gaza, including more than 25 vehicles in the past 48 hours. However, an Israeli military spokesperson said that Hamas lost control of northern Gaza. Meanwhile, Hezbollah's chief Hassan Nasrallah said that the group was using the new weapons in its attacks against Israel. On the other hand, several people were reportedly killed and others were injured in an Israeli airstrike that targeted the city of Rafah in Gaza. And this comes as Gaza's border authorities said that the Rafah crossing into Egypt would reopen on Sunday for foreign passport holders after closing on Friday. Egyptian sources said that the border would begin operating at 9 a.m. local time for foreigners and medical evacuees. India was among the 145 nations that voted in favor of the United Nations resolution that condemned settlement activities in the occupied Palestinian territory. The UN draft resolution titled Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem and the occupied Syrian Golan, was passed by overwhelming majority. According to Israeli media, there was some progress towards a deal to free hostages held by Hamas in Gaza. And this is according to reports that Israel would release women and minor Palestinian prisoners from its jails and consider letting fuel into Gaza.
As the war in Gaza continues and Israel insists it is pursuing the Hamas militant group, concerns are rising over the situation in the region. Hezbollah leader Nasrallah has said the United States is the only country that can stop the escalating conflict in West Asia, as it is, quote-unquote, managing this aggression. Nasrallah's comments come as tensions continue to rise along Lebanon's border with Israel, sparking fears of a regional spillover. Nasrallah has blamed the United States for the instability in West Asia. This is Nasrallah's second speech since the war broke out on October 7th.
الذي يستطيع أن يمنع أن يوقف هذا العدوان هو من يدير هذا العدوان، وهو أمريكا. هي التي تستطيع أن توقف هذا العدوان.
Earlier, Nasrallah said that the militia is not deterred by U.S. warnings to stay out of the Israel-Hamas war. In a televised speech, Nasrallah says that the fighting on the Lebanon-Israel border would not be limited. Meanwhile, Israel Defense Forces fighter jets have struck a series of Hezbollah infrastructure and military posts in Lebanon. Earlier today, a Hezbollah militant cell had launched several rockets from Lebanon towards northern Israel. In response, an IDF aircraft struck the militant cell and launch pad. The Israel-Hamas war inches closer to an inevitable milestone, the exodus of Palestinians. It has happened before and it is now happening again. While Israelis chant the slogan, "Never again," Gazans find themselves amidst another bout of migration yet again. Thousands of Gazans have begun to move southwards of Gaza City as Israeli tanks roll deeper into the enclave. Palestinians, including children and disabled people, are walking towards Khan Yunis on foot. They are carrying their belongings in bags and with bedding across their backs, as you can see there, and are using carts pulled by horses and donkeys carrying the injured. Gazans who had been sheltering in the Al-Shifa hospital are also traveling towards the south by foot after the Israeli Defense Forces struck it overnight. But it is the first time that this is happening. Actually, it's not the first time that this is happening. That was a question. There have been 3 major bouts of displacements in Gaza's history. The first ever was during Nakba in 1948. This is what is called the Great Catastrophe. 700,000 Palestinians were displaced from their homeland during the Six-Day War in 1967. Between 280,000 and 325,000 Palestinians were displaced. Then the 1973 war, which was called the Yom Kippur War, displaced around 160 to 190,000 Palestinians. And as of today, the Israel-Hamas war has rendered over 1 million Palestinians homeless in the Gaza Strip, without a home. This is this year. Wars not only changed the cause of people, but also the nation as well. The map of Israel dynamically changed over the course of decades and several wars. Here's how the space for Palestinians continued to shrink over the years. In 1947, the United Nations proposed partitioning Palestine into 2 states, one Jewish and the other Arab. The Jerusalem-Bethlehem area was to become an international city. The plan was accepted by Palestine's Jewish leadership but rejected by Arab leaders. In 1948, it witnessed the Nakba, and the following war ended in 1949 with a ceasefire and an amnesties line. Gaza Strip and the West Bank came into existence in this year. The biggest change to Israel's frontiers came in 1967. The Six-Day War left Israel in occupation of the Sinai Peninsula, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and most of the Syrian Golan Heights. Now, this tripled the size of territory under Israel's control, but Israel's borders got formalized only in 1979, when it was first recognized by Egypt under a peace treaty. Under this, Israel withdrew all its forces and settlers from the Sinai. The process was completed in 1982. But every change in the shape of maps witnessed a war, and wars always claim the lives of the innocent on both sides. Both Israel and the Gaza Strip are losing people on either side of the border. But while the Israeli Defense Forces mount their offensive, Gazans find themselves lost and are fending for themselves amidst an ever-intensifying humanitarian crisis. This is the long walk of Palestinians in Gaza, as you can see there, a walk with no destination at all. Let's just look at these visuals for a moment.
All right, so let's start with the big story that we are tracking on WION. These are the Arab and the Muslim leaders have gathered in Saudi Arabia for what has been dubbed as an extraordinary joint Islamic-Arab summit in an attempt to exert their influence to try and press the United States and the State of Israel to bring an immediate end to the bombings on the Gaza Strip. The leaders, including the Iranian president, have issued a strong statement. They've condemned Israel's relentless bombardment of the Gaza enclave. The Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi has called on the Arab and the Islamic world leaders to designate the Israeli military as a terrorist organization. In his first visit to Riyadh since Iran and Saudi Arabia agreed to restore their ties in the month of March, Ibrahim Raisi urged the Muslim nations that have ties with Israel to sever them and has called for greater support for the Palestinian people. The Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi has also called on for support from the Islamic nations, saying that Gaza is not an arena for words. The time has now come for action, and the action to be to immediately to cease fire on the innocent, hapless Palestinian civilians who are getting killed in their thousands.
این میدان دیگه میدان سخن تنها نیست که فقط سخن و اعلام موضع بشه. باید میدان عمل باشه و اقدام.
And echoing what the Iranian president has stated, the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad also called for the countries to stop the normalization talks with the state of Israel.
هي أن الكيان ازداد إيقاف أي مسار سياسي مع الكيان الصهيوني بكل ما يشمله المسار السياسي من عناوين اقتصادية أو غيرها، لتكون عودته مشروطة بالتزام الكيان بالوقف الفوري المديد لا المؤقت للإجرام بحق كل الفلسطينيين في كل فلسطين، مع السماح بإدخال المساعدات الفورية إلى غزة. أما الحديث عن الدولتين وإطلاق عملية السلام وغيرها من التفاصيل والحقوق.
The Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has denounced attacks on the Gaza Strip. He's also reiterated his stance during the Riyadh summit, calling for an immediate end to the violence in the Gaza Strip.
الرحمن الرحيم، أصحاب الفخامة كامل، ومن هذا المنطلق يسرنا أن نعلن عن إطلاق مبادرة خادم الحرمين الشريفين، وأن ندين ما يشهده قطاع غزة من اعتداء عسكري واستهداف المدنيين واستمرار انتهاكات سلطة الاحتلال الإسرائيلية للقانون الدولي الإنساني، لنؤكد ضرورة وقف هذه الحرب والتهجير القسري وتهيئة الظروف لعودة الاستقرار وتحقيق السلام في أفريقيا، وذلك عبر تدشين مشروعات وبرامج مائية في دول القارة بقيمة تتجاوز $1 مليار على مدى 10 سنوات.
The joint meeting has been convened in response to the exceptional circumstances taking place in the Gaza Strip. Earlier, two separate meetings were in fact scheduled over the weekend, one of the Arab League and one of the OIC members, but now it has been combined. The Arab nations are divided about normalizing their ties with Israel, and they've been condemning the humanitarian crisis that is happening at this moment due to the relentless campaign of bombings that Israel has resorted on the Gaza Strip. According to reports, the Arab foreign ministers who held an emergency meeting on Thursday were divided, as some countries led by Algeria were calling their other Arab nation partners to cut off all diplomatic ties with the state of Israel.
المملكة من قدمت هذه المبادرة وسعت أيضا المملكة العربية.
In the Arab world, we're being joined by Professor Asif Ramiz Dodi. Now, Professor Dodi is a foreign policy and a Middle East expert. He's joining us live on this broadcast. Now, Professor, we've been looking at what has been happening in the Gaza Strip for the last month, and the Arab leaders have been calling for an immediate ceasefire. And there was this extraordinary summit that's been held where the leaders of the Arab world and the Muslim nations have come together and they're calling for a ceasefire. But have the Arab nations done enough?
Well, Saleh, thank you for having me on your show. What is happening there is quite unfortunate. The world doesn't need a war. We have seen what's been happening there in Russia and Ukraine. So this is the biggest concern, one of the biggest concerns of the world, and especially for those countries who are going to be badly affected because of this. And in this extraordinary meeting, when we talk about, the Gaza Strip and what's happening there, I was just, trying to understand what you were saying in your introductory remarks. The first word was the hospitals. The hospitals are under attack, etc. I was going through one of very emotional remarks and messages yesterday, and I would like to quote it here. They say that in Palestine, their brothers and friends smell like hospitals, and the hospitals smell like graveyards, and graveyards smell like their brothers and relatives, and that is Palestine. When we have situation of this gravity. I mean, something where the world should realize the effect and impact if it is not controlled at the right time. That's the purpose, I think, those countries, especially in this region, they are trying to bring peace. They are trying to have some sort of
interject there. The question that I want you to, in fact, talk a bit about is, have these Arab nations used their leverage that they have to try and, to put some amount of pressure, if they can, on the United States and Israel for a ceasefire? Have the Arab nations made all the right noises, but have they acted on those noises that they are making?
Yeah, I think I have to agree with your question. When we see that it's not going to stop, we live in a world where we have rule-based system. We have international laws. Even wars have laws. So if it's not going to stop somewhere, they have to take the leverage, they have to show the unity, they have to come to the conclusion or some sort of, a decision where the ceasefire or the immediate kind of ceasefire is initiated. And that pressure, diplomatic pressure, or some sort of, whatever pressure that one can create, it's needed. And this is one of those tactics, because we know one of the ministers in Israel mentioned about the nuclear attacks. I mean, see where the world is going. So if they do not follow the international laws, if we do not care about the innocent lives, around 4,000 children are being, killed. I mean, that's something. So this is something these Arab nations and those countries, especially, it's not only Arab nations.
Professor Dori, that brings me to my next question. The United States has been pushing for the normalization of ties of these Arab nations with the State of Israel under the Abraham Accords. But because of this war, are we to now say that the Abraham Accords and the normalization of ties between the Arab nations and Israel has now been put into cold storage?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. And, these Arab nations, especially some of those progressive nations, they have vision, and they just tried to have some diversified, kind of vibrant kind of society. And considering that, they started having some sort of diplomatic ties and, some sort of connections and positive approach to bring peace and prosperity in the region. And now if we see these kinds of developments, I think when you talk about Abraham Accord, when you talk about having the diplomatic ties, etc., it's going to be in the cold storage, as you said.
All right. Thank you very much indeed, Professor, for joining us and getting us that perspective there.
Thank you.
Now, Arab and Muslim leaders gathered in Saudi Arabia for an extraordinary joint Islamic-Arab summit in an attempt to exert its influence to press the United States and Israel to bring an immediate end to the bombings which have resulted in such horrific suffering for the people in the Gaza Strip. The Iranian president was also present, and he has strongly condemned the Israeli bombardment of the Gazan enclave. In the latest, the Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi has called on the Arab and the Islamic world leaders to designate Israel's military as a terrorist organization. In his very first visit to Riyadh since Iran and Saudi Arabia agreed to restore their ties in the month of March, Ibrahim Raisi has urged nations that have ties with Israel to sever them and has called for greater support for the Palestinian people. The Iranian President Ibrahim has called for support from the Islamic nations, saying that Gaza is not an arena for words. It is time for nations to in fact act and bring about a concrete resolution to the bombings that are presently underway in the Gaza Strip.
میدان دیگه میدان سخن تنها نیست که فقط سخن و اعلام موضع بشه. باید میدان عمل باشه و اقدام.
Now, echoing what the Iranian president said, the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has called for countries to stop normalization talks with Israel.
هي أن الكيان ازداد إيقاف أي مسار سياسي مع الكيان الصهيوني بكل ما يشمله المسار السياسي من عناوين اقتصادية أو غيرها، لتكون عودته مشروطة بالتزام الكيان بالوقف الفوري المديد لا المؤقت للإجرام بحق كل الفلسطينيين في كل فلسطين، مع السماح بإدخال المساعدات الفورية إلى غزة. أما الحديث عن الدولتين وإطلاق عملية السلام وغيرها من التفاصيل والحقوق.
The Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has also denounced the attacks on the Gaza Strip. He's reiterated his stance during the Riyadh summit, calling for an immediate end to the bombings of Gaza.
الرحمن الرحيم. أصحاب الفخامة كامل، ومن هذا المنطلق يسرنا أن نعلن عن إطلاق مبادرة خادم الحرمين الشريفين وأن ندين ما يشهده قطاع غزة من اعتداء عسكري واستهداف المدنيين واستمرار انتهاكات سلطة الاحتلال الإسرائيلية للقانون الدولي الإنساني، لنؤكد ضرورة وقف هذه الحرب والتهجير القسري وتهيئة الظروف لعودة الاستقرار وتحقيق السلام في أفريقيا، وذلك عبر تدشين مشروعات وبرامج مائية في دول القارة بقيمة تتجاوز $1 مليار على مدى 10 سنوات.
The joint meeting has been convened in response to the exceptional circumstances taking place in the Gaza Strip. Earlier, 2 separate meetings were in fact scheduled over the weekend, one of the Arab League and one of the OIC member nations, and now it has been combined. The Arab nations are divided on normalizing ties with Israel and condemning the humanitarian crisis which has unfolded in the Gaza Strip. Now, to prepare for this extraordinary joint Arab-Muslim summit, and as per reports, the Arab foreign ministers who held an emergency meeting on Thursday were divided as some countries led by Algeria had called to cut off diplomatic ties with Israel altogether.
The UN Special Rapporteur on the Palestinian territories, Francesca Albanese, has described Israel's decision to allow a 4-hour humanitarian pause on the daily as a very cynical and cruel move. Condemning this move, she has said that Palestinians are being forcibly transferred out of the Gaza Strip. Take a look.
There has been continuous bombing, 6,000 bombs every week on the Gaza Strip, on this tiny piece of land where people are trapped, and the destruction is massive. There won't be any way back after what Israel is doing to the Gaza Strip. So 4 hours ceasefire, yes, to let people breathe and to remember what is the sound of life without bombing before starting bombing them again. It's very cynical and cruel. Now, with the evacuation order of 1.1 million people from northern Gaza, pushing them south while the south is still being bombed, of course, they're being forced out of the Gaza Strip. And by the way, mind you, there is already a plan, as a Reconquista, a plan to reoccupy and build Israeli cities and Israeli beaches on the northern Gaza. Where is the international community? This is a failure of the international community from a humanitarian, political, and legal point of view. Western countries, who are the guardians of democratic values, should be helping instead of enforcing a system of suprematism, as they're doing. They are enabling, by not addressing Israel's violations of international law, they are enabling them.
Now, there's absolutely no place in the Gaza Strip that is safe. There is not one school nor one hospital where people can in fact go to in fact save their lives. Now, this is what is happening at this moment. There's literally not a single place in the part of the Gaza Strip that is safe at all. Even the safest of places in a time of war, which are protected under international law, like for instance schools, where people have taken refuge, like for instance hospitals, where people have taken refuge, are also coming under attack. Now, the Israeli army claims that it has brought the war to the gates of the Al-Shifa hospital, the biggest hospital in the Gaza Strip. Remember, an estimated 60,000 people, 60,000 Palestinians had taken refuge within the premises of the Al-Shifa hospital because their homes had been bombed and they literally had been driven out of their homes, and they had come to the Al-Shifa hospital seeking refuge. And now the Al-Shifa hospital too is bearing the brunt of this war. Thousands of injured and displaced Palestinians are trapped inside the walls of the hospital, as this hospital, according to information that has now come in, has now been completely surrounded by the Israeli military, and there is a ferocious assault that has been unleashed on it. The constant airstrikes are a heavy blow to the healthcare system, and in fact the doctors in the Al-Shifa hospital say that their systems have literally collapsed because the hospital has run out of fuel. The operations in the Al-Shifa hospital had been suspended due to a lack of resources and power cuts. The doctors in the neonatal ward have been forced to carry out artificial respiration by hand on about 36 babies. Doctors Without Borders have said that it has lost all contact with the staff inside Gaza's biggest healthcare facility, the Al-Shifa hospital. The situation has literally gone out of hand, and now, according to information that has come in, at least about 3 children have been killed, and 39 young children who were in incubators passed away because the generators had to be turned off because there was no fuel, and therefore the oxygen supplies in these incubators went off. The hospital authorities have narrated the conditions of what is happening. They've issued an SOS call urging the world to come to their rescue.
الجثث الآن تملأ ساحة المستشفى، خصوصا بعد مجزرة مدرسة البراق التي أسفرت عن 50 شهيد، وملقون في الساحة الأمامية للمستشفى، بالإضافة إلى وجود عشرات الجثث الموجودة مسبقا في مشرحة مجمع الشفاء الطبي. لا يوجد كهرباء لحفظها ولا يوجد إمكانية لدفنها. النفايات الطبية لا يمكن إخراجها من مباني المستشفى، مما يهدد بانتشار العدوى ووجود كارثة في المكان. خيام النازحين اشتعلت فيها النيران نتيجة القصف المتواصل لساحات ومباني المستشفى. Here in Gaza we facing bad war crimes. Hospitals now in the north facing direct bombing from the Israeli warplanes. There is no spaces for the patients, there is no blood for them, and there is a lot of killed body around the hospital. Inside the hospital the killed body cannot be contained. This is a call for a human community. This should stop now. We cannot continue with such war crimes. It is illogic. There is no excuse to have direct attack toward the hospital.
According to reports, the Hamas fighters, this is what the Israelis are of course claiming. They say that Hamas is hiding inside the hospitals and therefore they are going after the healthcare infrastructure in the Gaza Strip. The Israelis claim that there is a command center underneath the Al-Shifa hospital. The Israeli forces are making their move and they are trying to enter into the premises. The IDF has ordered the hospital authorities to start evacuating the place completely. Now remember, there are an estimated 60,000 people that we are talking about who have sought a refuge inside the Al-Shifa hospital. They had come there in the hope that they'd find some bit of respite from the bombing, and now they're being told to evacuate from the one place that they thought they would be safe. But what is clear is that there literally is no place that is safe, not even hospitals, not schools. There's not a single place of refuge which is not getting bombed as we speak. All right, now to tell us more as to what is happening at this moment in the Gaza Strip and especially in terms of the health infrastructure there, we're being joined by Mr. Benoit Carpentier. He's joining us live from Geneva. Mr. Carpentier is in fact the spokesperson for the International Federation of the Red Cross and the Red Crescent Societies. Now, Mr. Carpentier, there are some very distressing images and reports that are emerging from the Al-Shifa hospital, which is the biggest healthcare facility in the Gaza Strip. Tell us, are you even able to contact with members of the Al-Shifa hospital there?
Afternoon. Yes, the images are more than distressing, and we've been alerting the world for weeks now that this was coming. The Al-Shifa hospital is, as you said, the biggest hospital. We are with the Palestinian Red Crescent operating in the Al-Quds hospital, and they are facing more or less the same issues, which is lack of electricity, lack of fuel, also lack of electricity, intense fighting around the hospital and not being able to operate at all. Palestinian Red Crescent runs the hospital, but they also run the ambulance services. And because of the fighting, because of the state of the roads, and because of the lack of fuel to be able to operate the ambulances that have not been damaged during the fighting, they're actually unable to operate at the moment. We've lost contact with them for several hours now. So because of the the fighting and the damage on the lines, it's very, very complicated to get a good picture of what's going on. But we know it's terrible.
And also, Mr. Carpentier, Israel continues to claim, it's been doing this for the last several weeks now. It says that Hamas has got its command center underneath the Al-Shifa hospital. Now, you are a spokesperson of the Red Cross and the Red Crescent societies there which operate. Now, the question that I want to ask you is, is there any evidence whatsoever to state that Hamas has got its command center under the Al-Shifa hospital?
This is not, our position or mandate or role to do that. What we have to look at is the numbers that you gave earlier, the 60,000 civilians, the staff, the health workers that are in the hospital and that need to be protected. There's absolutely no negotiation on that. So that's what matters for us, and that's what needs to be respected.
But also there are reports that the Al-Shifa hospital has now completely run out of fuel, and therefore the incubators in which about 38 young babies were in, they have died, is the report that has come in. Can that be confirmed?
We're not operating directly in Al-Shifa, but in Al-Quds hospital, where the Palestinian Red Crescent operates, we have exactly the same situation. We have babies in incubators. We have 3 infants that are on life-saving incubators. We have 8 patients that are on ventilators, besides those who are also in the ICU. And they are going to run out of fuel and electricity. Those people, those children, those babies, the moment the electricity is pulled off, will die.
And also, hospitals are protected under international law. And the fact that the Israeli army is reported to be carrying out operations so close to the hospitals, and in some cases, some of these hospitals have even come under attack. How does the Red Cross and the Red Crescent intend to even address this issue?
We've been addressing it since the beginning of the conflict, and we will always do it. And as I said earlier, the hospitals, the civilians, the health workers are protected and must be protected at all times. So we can only repeat our calls and address all parties to make sure that happens.
And my last quick question to you is, now Israel has been talking about humanitarian pauses for a period of 4 hours. So in these humanitarian pauses, has it at all been possible that some kind of aid, some kind of medical supplies have been taken to the hospitals in the northern part of Gaza?
That's the issue. That you have a conflict area, you have roads, infrastructures that have been damaged by the bombing. You have an immense amount of needs and people. So 4 hours is very small compared to what needs to be done. We need uninjured, safe access with a constant flow of aid entering Gaza. There's been trucks entering Gaza over the last 2 or 3 weeks now, but that's obviously not enough at all, and that's not reaching the north at all for the moment.
Absolutely, indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Carpentier, for joining us and getting us that perspective there.
We begin with the latest coming in from the Israel-Hamas war. The death toll is rising as the fighting intensifies between Israeli forces and Hamas militant near and around hospitals. Israel is now facing mounting international pressure, including from its main ally, the United States, to do more to protect Palestinian civilians in Gaza. In what appeared to be a series of Israeli military airstrikes in the Palestinian territory, a series of explosions lit up the night sky over the Gaza Strip. And the Hamas-run Gaza Health Services say more than 11,000 Palestinians have been killed since the fighting began. According to Hamas Health Ministry, at least 3 strikes over several hours hit the courtyard and the obstetrics department of Al-Shifa hospital, killing several and wounding others sheltering there. Chaotic scenes were seen outside the hospital as many were attempting to flee. Israel's military said that a misfired projectile launched by militant groups in Gaza had hit Al-Shifa hospital. It further dismissed reports that said that the blast was caused by an Israeli airstrike. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization showed what Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital looked like prior to thousands of people who had been sheltering at the complex, fleeing the area after reports of strikes. In another attack by Israeli forces, one person was killed and 28 others were wounded in a shooting by Israeli forces at Al-Quds hospital in Gaza. And medical teams in Gaza City's Al-Quds hospital worked under torchlight to treat the patients. On the other hand, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited an army base at the border with Gaza. Netanyahu spoke with the soldiers and joined them for Sabbath service. He praised the soldiers for their job to the security of Israel. Evacuations from the Gaza Strip into Egypt for foreign passport holders and for Palestinians needing urgent medical treatment were suspended due to problems bringing medical evacuees to the Rafah border crossing from inside Gaza. And this comes as Israel's chief military spokesperson said that more than 100,000 residents of the Gaza Strip have fled southwards over the last 2 days as Israeli forces operate deep in the Gaza city.
הדבר הזה קורה בצורה מסודרת לאוכלוסייה שנמצאת בעזה באופן כזה שהוא לא רק שהוא לא מפריע ללחימה, הוא משפר את מצבנו, כי בסוף שירדו כבר למעלה יותר מ-100,000 אנשים, רק ביומיים האחרונים יורדים דרומה, זה מאפשר לנו להילחם ולהתמקד במחבלים. החלק השני זה החלק ההומניטרי שמגיע ממצרים, בהובלה של מצרים וארצות הברית ומדינות מתונות אחרות בעולם הערבי שמכניסות אוכל, מכניסות תרופות, מסייעות באוהלים ובהקמת בתי חולים שדה, שבעתיד יאפשרו גם פינוי של בתי חולים אחרים שמהווים תשתית טרור, והדבר הזה קורה דרומית לנחל עזה, לאותה אוכלוסייה שזזה, ולכן שני המאמצים האלה ביחד מאפשרים לנו להילחם טוב יותר וממוקד יותר במחבלי חמאס.
The Israeli military released video, it says, showed airstrikes on a series of Hezbollah targets in Lebanese territory. And the attacks also included military positions where the group was believed to have been operating, a weapons warehouse and an intelligence site. As the war continues, the international community is also making efforts to ease the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza and initiate hostage release. Now, in an interview with BBC French President Emmanuel Macron, Macron said that while he recognizes Israel's right to protect itself, there was no justification for the bombing and saying a ceasefire would benefit Israel. On the other hand, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said the Palestinian Authority could play a role in administering the Gaza Strip on condition that there was a full political solution that also encompassed the occupied West Bank. Amnesty International Secretary has also called out the Western Bloc double standards when it comes to international conflicts that are a threat to human rights. The United States expressed growing concern about the rising Palestinian death toll in the Gaza Strip, where health officials said that the number killed in a 5-week-old Israeli bombardment had topped 11,000. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman called for an end to the war in Gaza during an African-Saudi summit held in the kingdom's capital, Riyadh.
وندين ما يشهده قطاع غزة من اعتداء عسكري واستهداف المدنيين واستمرار انتهاكات سلطة الاحتلال الإسرائيلية للقانون الدولي الإنساني لنؤكد ضرورة وقف هذه الحرب والتهجير القسري وتهيئة الظروف لعودة الاستقرار وتحقيق السلام في أفريقيا، وذلك عبر تدشين مشروعات وبرامج مائية في دول القارة بقيمة تتجاوز $1 مليار على مدى 10 سنوات.
In Israel, Tel Aviv, families and friends of Israeli hostages attended an event marking the start of the Jewish Sabbath. At the event, which was a large gathering held around a large empty table set for 200 some missing hostages, performers sang religious hymns while a few people stopped to light a candle and pray. Israel has meanwhile revised Hamas attack death toll to around 1,200.
Now remember, even wars have rules. There are places such as hospitals, schools, where people can take refuge, and these must be sanctuaries where people can be safe even in a place of conflict. But in the Gaza Strip, there are no sanctuaries whatsoever. Even hospitals, United Nations-run schools and residential apartments have all come under the target of the Israeli forces. Now, Israel, in its campaign of relentless bombings, has even targeted hospitals. And in this case, the Al-Shifa hospital, the biggest health facility in the Gaza Strip, has also become one of its targets. An estimated 60,000 people have taken refuge within the premises of the Al-Shifa hospital. The Palestinians are trapped inside the walls of the hospitals, and according to reports that are coming in, Israel has staged some ferocious attacks just on the outskirts of the premises of the Al-Shifa hospitals. The constant airstrikes have dealt a heavy blow to the healthcare system. The operations in the Al-Shifa hospital, according to reports, have now been suspended due to lack of resources and power cuts. The fuel has completely run out. And according to reports that have come in, there were about 38 infants in incubators, and the power has gone off, and therefore, in the neonatal ward, they are said to have actually been killed because the power has gone off. The Doctors Without Borders have said that they have lost complete contact with their staff inside Gaza's biggest healthcare facility, the Al-Shifa hospital. The situation is extremely dire, and the lives of several people who at this moment are taking treatment inside the Al-Shifa hospital are at risk. And 39 children have passed away inside the incubators because the oxygen has run out, because the electricity has gone off. The hospital authorities narrate the extremely dire conditions, and they've issued an SOS and have urged the world leaders to come to their rescue. But the question, of course, is any world leader listening?
الجثث الآن تملأ ساحة المستشفى، خصوصا بعد مجزرة مدرسة البراق التي أسفرت عن 50 شهيد، وملقون في الساحة الأمامية للمستشفى، بالإضافة إلى وجود عشرات الجثث الموجودة مسبقا في مشرحة مجمع الشفاء الطبي. لا يوجد كهرباء لحفظها ولا يوجد إمكانية لدفنها. النفايات الطبية لا يمكن إخراجها من مباني المستشفى، مما يهدد بانتشار العدوى ووجود كارثة في المكان. خيام النازحين اشتعلت فيها النيران نتيجة القصف المتواصل لساحات ومباني المستشفى. Here in Gaza we facing bad war crimes. Hospitals now in the north facing direct bombing from the Israeli warplanes. There is no spaces for the patients, there is no blood for them, and there is a lot of killed body around the hospital. Inside the hospital, the killed body cannot be contained. This is a call for a human community. This should stop now. We cannot continue with such war crimes. It is unlogic. There is no excuse to have direct attack toward the hospital.
According to reports, Hamas, this is what Israelis are claiming, that Hamas is hiding underneath the Al-Shifa hospital. The Israelis have also put out videos where they say, these are graphic videos, where they say that Hamas has got a command center underneath the Al-Shifa hospital. So with Israeli forces making their way and inching closer and closer to the Al-Shifa hospital premises, the question, of course, is what is to happen to the 60,000 Palestinian people who have taken refuge inside the hospital. Now, the Israeli authorities say that they must all evacuate, but remember, there's literally no place that is safe in the Gaza Strip. And despite the humanitarian pauses that Israel has announced, what is actually happening at this moment is people can only flee from one place to another, but there is literally no place that can actually guarantee the safety of the Palestinian people. And also to give us more perspective in terms of what is happening at this moment, we are being joined by Mr. Mohammed Najib, who's joining us live from Ramallah. Mr. Najib is a war correspondent and also a security analyst. Now, Mr. Najib, the reports and also the images that are emerging from what is happening at this moment in the Al-Shifa hospital are extremely concerning. Tell us as to what the situation is like out there, because we're given to understand that the Israelis are operating very close to the compound of the Al-Shifa premises.
Yes, Mohammed, since yesterday evening, the Israeli tanks came close and surrounded Al-Shifa hospital, 200 meters far from Al-Shifa hospital, and continue their bombing around the hospital, preventing the ambulances to transport injured from other areas to the hospital. There are some 16,000 Palestinians who displaced from their homes are hiding there, taking shelter, in addition to 500 patients. Some of them are a kidney failure and need to have the machines to be connected to the machines, other at the ICU. And the director of the hospital says that the fuel is about to run within a few 3 hours. So then they have to disconnect the machines from those patients and injured, so that will threat their lives. Israel claims that Hamas command hidden there, but Israel says that there are 40,000 Hamas fighters in Gaza, and it's unlikely to believe that the 40,000 are hidden in a hospital, because they have their own tunnels, they have other areas. So this unjustified that targeting the Al-Quds hospital, Al-Shifa hospital, and other hospitals. This is unacceptable according to the international law, the war law, the humanitarian law. It could be criticized by all the international organizations. And the sympathy that was with Israel, pro-Israel at the beginning of this war, now changed, because no one accepts to target the hospital.
Mr. Najeeb, this was the question that I wanted to ask you. In the initial days of the war, Israel had said that it does not target hospitals. And now it is saying that Hamas has got its main command center underneath the Al-Shifa hospital. Now, there are a lot of international health agencies which operate in the Al-Shifa hospital. Has there ever been any evidence that Hamas has a command center underneath the Al-Shifa hospital?
I saw some evidences and the testimonies for those engineers who built the hospitals there, and Indonesian hospital, Al-Quds hospital, and also the foreign medicines who operate and work at Al-Shifa hospital. And they said they toured the hospital.